So today we're gonna do push day number 2. I'm actually starting with rear delts today. It's gonna be a little smaller-ish of a workout. We're gonna do 5 total exercises, 2 main back movements, a rear delt, which we're starting with, and then 2 biceps to finish off. I'm starting with the rear delts. Similar to like I've explained in the past, I have the most energy in the beginning. Lately on other back days, or on other pull days, sorry. Also, I think I said push too. I meant pull too if I said that. Other pull days, I've been saving rear delts towards the end, which is completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But because I have the energy in the beginning of this workout, I'm going to start with them. Now, I just did one actual working set. I'm going to do 3. What I'm doing here is a mechanical drop set for the rear delts. I'm splitting up the ranges into 2 parts for one set. So what I mean by that is I'm going to work the beginning range first for about 15 to 20 reps, and then I'm going to go into the end range for about 15 to 20 reps. I like doing it this way. It just changes things up and helps me prolong the set. And it allows me to take or train the rear delt through its entire contractile range. Meaning I can load the beginning range and then I can also load the end range. If I just do one basic body position, there's gonna be a sticking point where it's gonna be heaviest in the movement, like pretty much every exercise. So this allows me again to just kind of load that beginning range, and then by switching my body position, I can load the end range. So I'll show you what I mean. Come around on this side. I'm gonna do this arm first. Now, I want to position my arm, first and foremost, I want to make sure that this cable is in line with the working arm. Once you establish that, that's basically just going to dictate the height that you want the cable. You can come out at 90 degrees, that's completely fine, whatever's preference. I find this to kind of hurt or feel uncomfortable on my shoulder, so I like to kind of come down on a diagonal, not quite 45 degrees, but again, I have this roughly shoulder height, this pulley, and then I'm just going to come down at roughly a 45 degree or a little above that, making sure that this cable is aligned with that arm. Now I'm going to adjust my body position to ensure that I'm training that beginning or lengthened range. So one thing to think about is whenever this cable is around 90 degrees with your arm or with your wrist, that's the heaviest part of the movement. So I'm going to start with this cable at 90 degrees with my wrist, and I'm actually just going to turn my torso into that arm. This is going to really stretch out that rear delt. And now I'm going to maintain this position. So I'm almost pointing my sternum as straight as possible, reaching this arm over. And then as I initiate the movement, I'm thinking about reaching around. So I'm not just pulling back, I'm reaching out and away from me. And I'm not going to go all the way. I mean, you can, but again, the closer this cable gets to my body, there really is no more resistance in this range. So I'm actually just going to stay in the kind of like a half rep or a partial rep range. Again, working that beginning range, 15 to 20 reps. Again, I'm thinking about reaching as far around me as possible, especially in this end range, to create as much tension on that rear delt. Okay, I'm going to keep my arm here because I want to work the end range. So now I'm actually going to do the opposite. I'm pushing my torso away from that arm. Now this is around 90 degrees, so this is going to be the heaviest part of the movement. And I'm just going to stay in this end range, again, 15 to 20 reps. Fuck. And if you do that correctly, it should burn a lot. So again, the reason I like doing these mechanical drop sets, I'm not actually changing the weight, I'm just adjusting the mechanics or my body's position with this cable, and that's going to allow me to target and train different parts of the range of the movement. So I'm gonna do the other thing, or sorry, the other arm. The other thing. We're gonna do the other thing on the other arm. And I'm reaching, remember, I'm reaching away from me on every rep. And then as I initiate that movement, I'm actually pushing my hand out and away, like I'm trying to reach in front. Oh. We're gonna do one more set of that. Now my goal with this is trying to keep my torso as stable as possible. So I don't want to be twisting into the movement. If anything, I'm pushing and rotating into that arm the entire time. Okay, we're gonna move on. We're gonna do that lat pull down machine because I like it. 4 sets here, and just going to failure, and as heavy as I can. So covered this so many times, but main points that we're focusing on is keeping hips down the entire time, regardless of how heavy we go. We do not want to be using our body weight as momentum to move that weight. So in other words, I don't want my butt coming off the seat and then slamming my butt down to initiate that movement. So I'm driving my knees in, keeping myself down, keeping my hips stable so I can load as much tension on my lats and obviously some of those upper back muscles. I'm arching, I'm bringing my chest up through the movement. I want to really retract and contract pretty much everything in my back. Okay. I'm also really focused on obviously controlling the negative or the eccentric. I find oftentimes people use a lot of momentum to initiate the movement, or they'll control it, but then everything else goes out the window once they get to that end range, and then they just drop back into it. And you see that a lot with pretty much everything, like squats or chest press, or sorry, bench press. You know, guys will control it up and then they'll just dive bomb it down. Same thing here, you'll just, in this case, dive bomb it up. Which doesn't sound like proper, but the goal is to control. So I want to control every set, every rep, especially that eccentric. That's going to give me the most chance of muscle growth, because the eccentric is extremely important for initiating, stimulating, and growing muscle. So controlling that eccentric can be 1 second, can be 3 seconds, it doesn't matter, but keeping the reps smooth, consistent, and controlled will go much further in your progress and in your fitness journey. I'm gonna do another set at that weight, or a third set. But as you can see there, again, I'm really controlling that negative. I'm not just letting the weight control me or the movement. So if that means lowering the weight, then I think it's much more beneficial to do that as opposed to just trying to go as heavy as possible and ego your way through it. I'm not against cheat reps. I'm not against even obviously partial reps and things like that, or using a little bit of momentum. But if you're going to use momentum, at least have some control over that negative or that eccentric. That's my rant on negatives and eccentrics. I can go on about it all day, but I believe it's extremely important. Ugh. We got one more set. Okay, we're gonna move on. We're gonna do some standing rows, machine rows. I like doing these standing, especially the hammer strength lat row, like horizontal row. I like doing it standing because for a few reasons. One, I find I have a bit more leverage. I'm a little more stable, kind of. I mean, I guess technically seated, I'd be more stable with my chest on this pad. But one of the big reasons is it offers a little bit more range of motion, so I can get a deeper stretch. But I'm also adjusting the resistance profile of the actual exercise of this machine. Because by standing, if you notice, these plates, the starting position of these plates, if you pan down to the plates, you'll see that one, they're started elevated, but two, they're starting closer to the top of that pivot point, meaning this is going to be the hardest part of the movement right here in this beginning range. And then as I row in, those plates get even closer to the top of that pivot point, which makes the movement actually get a little bit easier. So right here, they're furthest away from that pivot point. What I mean by that is if you drew a line just straight up and down through this pivot point, obviously if these weights get closer to that line, that intersecting line, they could just balance there and there's no resistance at all because that resistance is going straight down. So when they move further away from that midline of that pivot point, that's going to be the greatest amount of resistance. And then obviously at the bottom here, they get closer to the bottom or underneath that pivot point where there would be no real resistance. So that's kind of like a brief description or depiction of what I'm trying to explain. So again, as I stand back, I'm adjusting that resistance profile of this actual movement, making it hardest in that beginning or lengthened range. And then as I row in, it gets easier. And then lastly, because this moves on an arc, by me standing higher up above it, that handle naturally wants to drift downward. So it's actually helping me force my shoulder and elbow down towards the ground, which is already what I want to do when I'm performing rows, is I want to drive my shoulder and elbow down the entire time towards that hip, or in this case, towards the ground. So this kind of helps make this a little more efficient in this movement. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with sitting, bringing your chest closer and working in this range of motion. It's completely fine. But that's kind of why I'm choosing to do it standing as opposed to seated. I just find I can get a little bit more out of the movement and generate greater force on my lat. Oh. Mm. Ugh. Mm. 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 So if you were ever wondering why people choose to stand and do this movement, that's why. You're just, and you may have tried it. One of you watching is that if you've tried it standing, it may actually feel better. And that's because you're aligning the resistance profile of the actual machine with the strength profile of your actual lats. See, our lats, well, like most muscles in our body, are weakest at the extreme. So we're really weak when we're lengthened, and we're also weak when we're fully shortened. We're usually strongest in that mid range. So that's why this might feel a little more natural, because we're a little stronger in that mid range going towards that beginning range. Obviously, like I said, really lengthened, we're weakest. But typically, as we pull that arm in, we become pretty weak, and that's why we tend to struggle a lot at the end ranges for a lot of back movements like lat pull downs or pull-ups. It gets really, really hard in this end shortened range. So this kind of helps match the resistance profile to our strength profile of our lat, making it a bit more efficient. Now I'm using a split stance. I'm driving my leg on my working side into the bottom here of that footrest, just to create as much stability as possible for the movement. Using this opposite arm, obviously, as a counterweight. All right, we're gonna do one more set, and then we'll move on to some biceps. Full stretch on every rep. And I'm not twisting, so I'm not twisting like this. I'm keeping my chest and sternum straight the entire time. Oh, shit. Oh, that's it. Oh. All right, that is it for our back. We're gonna do some biceps now. Again, kind of a little lighter, not in the weight way, but in like more of the volume way of a back day or a pull day, sorry. We did a lot previous pull day, and I'm just kind of sprinkling in a little extra work because my back is somewhat recovered now. And then we'll do some bit more biceps as well. Sure, of my splits, I'm kind of aiming for a bit of high volume, like I've mentioned in the past or previous videos, is because I've done lower volume, like 10, 12 sets per week. And I just find that does not work for me at this level. I've been training now for almost over 16 years. So I started when I was 13, I'm 30 now. So I find the sweet spot for me, for most muscle groups, is hitting close to that 20 set per week, maybe even a little bit more. Because one thing you want to think about when you're structuring your workout plans is all the muscles in the body, a lot of them have different recovery phases. Some take long, like for most people, legs can take a long time to recover. Back can take, a decent amount to recover. But sometimes chest can take, a couple days and you feel like you could do heavy bench press again, or a heavy chest day, or a high volume chest day. Arms and shoulders are other ones that pretty much recover fairly quickly. So you want to have that in mind when you're structuring your workout. Don't just think about volume, but also think about the frequency in which you're training these muscles. Obviously, given that they're fully recovered, you'll optimize your training split a lot more, and you'll actually be able to capitalize on days that you'll be able to actually grow and make progress. And if you don't think about that, then you actually end up sometimes missing out on opportunities that could be used for growing certain muscle groups that are fully recovered. So keep that in mind. Think about the ones that on your body recover fairly quickly and try to hit those 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times per week if you can get away with that. All right, so we're doing, as you just saw, this incline, this old school incline flex seated curl. Now this isn't similar to, I mean, it's kind of similar to like a dumbbell incline curl, but the difference is that my arms are actually in line with my torso. So technically it's not the same thing, because if I was on an incline bench and I'm lying back, my arms would be behind my body, which would place a lot more tension in that stretched position on my biceps. So my biceps aren't going to be as stretched. However, what I like about this is, one, by laying back, I'm going to be a lot more stable. By having this pad keeps my arms stable, allows me to drive my tricep into that pad the entire time to initiate every rep. But most importantly, the resistance profile of this machine actually does target more of this beginning or lengthened range of my biceps, similar to that of almost like a preacher curl. And then as I come up, the movement does get a little bit easier up towards the top or the end range. Now, what I'm thinking about when I'm initiating movement, like I said, I'm driving my tricep, or this bottom part of my arm, into this pad the entire time. I'm not lifting it off, and I'm not moving my shoulder around like this. I'm keeping this as stable as possible, and all I'm thinking about is bringing my forearm to my bicep. Next, another thing that I want to think about is making sure that my elbow is lined up with this axis of rotation. I stress about this a lot, but it's very important that you understand that you want to keep this joint aligned with the actual pivot point of the machine. That's going to get the most out of the movement, allow you to generate as much force as possible on the actual muscle that you're trying to train. For 3 sets here, high reps to 20, but again, trying to take them to pretty much failure, where I can't really even do a partial. Controlling that eccentric on every single rep. And then just thinking about bringing that forearm into my bicep. Fuck. Yeah, as you see, I'm doing one arm at a time. You don't have to, you could do both arms. I just find with a lot of these machines, if I do both arms, it gets this kind of floaty feel where if I generate more force on one side, this side kind of lightens up. So I try to just do one arm at a time, unless I'm in a time crunch. Ow. Myself about 30 more seconds because this side was resting. A little bit heavier. Just a teens. This machine is so deceiving too, because I have it at 160 pounds, single arm. It's not actually 160 pounds. I mean, it is set on the machine, just I'm not lifting because of the pulleys. Anyways, I digress. Last set. Ooh. Mm. 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 Hmm. All right, we're gonna move on. We're gonna do, I think at the end for our last exercise, we're just gonna do a dumbbell hammer curl, just to work a little bit of forearm, more of that brachialis muscle, and just to switch things up a bit. I don't do enough hammer curls. I really should. I should train more forearms. I get comments sometimes on my pictures, on my videos, of people saying like, "Man, this guy needs to train more forearms," and I do. I don't actually have small forearms, but I've had in the recent years really bad tendonitis in both forearms, which is brutal. I actually found training forearms to be helpful, but I mean, forearms are kind of like the next to calves, where a lot of people neglect them because they're just kind of really accessory movements. But I really should start training more and prioritizing them. So that long ramble, we're going to do some dumbbell hammer curls. Now, I've mentioned this in the past few workouts. I'm leaning to one side. I'm doing one arm at a time. It just helps me better align this upper arm with the line of force, which again is gravity because we're using dumbbells. So that line of force is literally just going straight down. So I want to make sure that my bicep in this upper part of my arm is aligned with that line of force, which is just going straight down. Now, if your elbow's a little bit flared, it might not be the worst thing, but over time you might create what's called shear force on that joint. Because it's a hinge joint, it only moves in that one direction. Again, I've mentioned this in the past, but I'm just reiterating it. So just be sure to, or be cognizant of that. Your setup, make sure that the arm is stable and that it's aligned with that actual line of force, whether you're using a machine or in this case, free weights, which is gravity. All right, we got our last set here. I went a little bit heavier. Now again, my goal is to keep this arm in line with that line of force, and I'm keeping it as stable and locked in position as possible. I don't want it to be moving around, and I don't want to use much momentum. So again, all I'm focused on is just bringing my forearm to my biceps. Keeping that wrist straight the entire time. I don't want my wrist to be drifting like that. All right, that's it for our pull workout today. We did a bit of back. We started with rear delts, and I showed you that kind of funky, cool mechanical drop set you can try. And again, I've stressed this in previous videos, but my goal with these videos, I mean, I don't know what the hell I'm doing with YouTube. I'm trying to do this thing, but my goal with these videos, honestly, is to, if I can teach you one thing through my workouts, that's kind of my goal, is for you to walk away with something new, a piece of information that you can go like, oh shit, I never thought of it like that, or oh cool, I've never done that before, or I never thought of that, or anything. That's kind of my goal. I don't really care about the fluff. I'm trying to just show you what I've done, what I've learned, and what works for me. This isn't the be all or end all. This isn't the only way for you to train. This is, again, just things that I've learned that have helped me along my way. And if I can give back and teach you guys, then I'm happy. So until next time, I think we're going to do a push day next. I believe that's in the right order. And yeah, until next time.